I'm Lisa Stone, and you are listening to Season 8 of Parenting Aces. Welcome to Season 8 of the Parenting Aces Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Stone. This is our second to last episode of the season. Hard to believe. We have done a bunch this year. It's been really fun, but we've got one more to finish out 2019, and then we're going to be taking a little hiatus until the new year. I have learned from experience that the month of December is not a good month for podcast traffic, and everybody's so stinking busy with the holidays and travel and family and all good things. And so we will take our little hiatus as well. But in this week's episode, we have Todd Widom back with us, and it's been a while since Todd's been on the podcast, and he and I have texted back and forth many, many times trying to make things work with my move. That got a little crazy, but I finally got him back on the show, and we are going to be discussing point construction and how kids need to be taught point construction and what coaches can do to teach these children how to understand the geometry of the court, how to understand and recognize their opponent's strengths and weaknesses, and how to play to those strengths and weaknesses. So I think you're going to find this episode super informative. Todd shares some good details, some good tips. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Parenting Aces with Todd Widom. Todd Widom, so happy to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me once again.
Well, it's fun. And I mean, we haven't done one in a few weeks, and it was just kind of time. So I'm happy that you could carve some time out of your busy schedule to join me.
Well, it's about time you invited me back on, Lisa. Come on.
Now, you know, you always have an open invitation anytime. And every time I see you post a podcast with somebody else, I get a little twinge of jealousy, I got to admit.
Well, it's just to keep you on your toes a little bit.
Mission accomplished. So today we are going to talk point construction and why that's important. And so I am going to just let you do your thing.
Sure. I mean, well, where do we start? So basically, I posted some videos of an 11-year-old that's training full time in my system on Facebook and on Instagram. So if people would like to take a look at that, they can. And so it gave a good topic, I believe, for this show on point construction for junior tennis players and how you accomplish that. And really, I've had many parents over the last, say, it's about 9.5 years I've been coaching that have contacted me saying, well, my child looks great in practice and they're having great lessons and they're having great groups. But for some reason, they just don't know what they're doing in a tournament. They don't know how to construct points and they don't know how to compete. And I don't know what to do. And so that's a very normal phone call for me with the parents of junior tennis players. So how do we accomplish this? How do we teach kids how to construct proper points? First, what I can say before we even get into point construction is that it starts with a good foundation. So if anyone knows how Pierre and I teach or they look at our social media, I put a lot of stuff out there. And so, people can try to, obviously take a look at it, maybe copy it, whatever they'd like to do. But the bottom line is tennis is about hitting targets, okay, and hitting proper targets. And in order to do that, physically, mentally, technically, the foundation of those things, they have to be very solid to even think about constructing a proper point. Okay, so I can give you an example. I've had college players that have come over that I never saw in their junior tennis career, and just a very simple cross court drill. I put a cone 2 or 3 feet from the baseline and the sideline for both players, and all I'm looking at is how often they can hit these targets. Mm-hmm. Great players can get in great position. They can strike the ball the same. They can put the same spin on the ball. They can duplicate shots over and over and over again to hit proper targets on a tennis court. Okay, so that's a foundation. And I can tell you that I've had many college players that after a couple balls or two, say 2-3 balls, they're spraying it all over the place. So right then and there, and I haven't put any pressure on them or anything. They're not in a tournament match. They're not competing. All they're doing is drilling, and they're struggling. Why? Because it's about the foundation. So the proper foundation, the kids have solid footwork, they have solid balance, striking ability, they can hit the ball the same way, they can concentrate for longer periods of time, they can hit the ball in front of them, they understand the height and the depth that's required to hit a proper solid ball over and over and over again. So first and foremost, that's what we work on. And every child coming to me is different. Right? They have different body types. They've had different coaching, different backgrounds. Everything is different. So as I've said in many other podcasts, the goal is to make sure that these kids are rocking and rolling and playing great tennis by the time they're 16 to 18 years old to get ready for high-level college tennis, which is why people come to me. So my normal client that comes to me is, for people that maybe don't know me, is that they're coming in and they're requesting the most elite colleges in the country. And obviously they're in the world. They are the Harvards and the Stanfords and the University of Virginias and those types of schools. That's why the kids are coming into the type of system that I have. So the kids have to be trained really well. And so I'm one of the few guys in my generation of when I came out of college tennis and pro tennis that went into the private sector, junior development. Most of the guys that I competed with either went into college coaching or they started working for the USTA. So we have very good relationships, Pierre and I, with a lot of the guys I competed with, as well as a lot of the coaches in the college arena that were coaching when I came through college tennis. So a couple of their main concerns with tennis players, and especially the American players, is number one, they play too short. They don't hit the ball deep enough, right? So we're talking about targets again. They're not tough enough, and they're not problem solving well, right? And they
tough
have
enough meaning mentally or physically?
Mentally tough enough, yes, to compete and problem solve and figure out a way to win for their tennis team. Got it. Right. So if something's not going well, they don't know how to switch it up and adapt to the situations to be able to get through that match and come away with a win. And then lastly is point construction. They're struggling. A lot of the kids are struggling to plan a proper tennis point. They're hitting, they're running, they may be competing hard, but they really don't fully understand what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be breaking down their opponent's weakness across the net. So if you don't understand that it's tough to become a great player. And so these things are trained every single day in my system. So how do you accomplish that, right? We'll go back to what we really want to talk about is point construction. Well, there's targets of where to serve on proper marks, where to hit the first ball, how to then create a game for particular individuals so that they are playing their best tennis from 16 to 18 years old. And to be hitting these proper targets over and over and over again, you have to have a great foundation, not only of technically and physically, but mentally. You cannot have lapses or else you'll see it. They'll be missing their targets. They'll be playing down the middle of the court and these types of things and playing short. And so in high-level tennis, you'll get in trouble.
Okay, but so before you can teach point construction, as you're saying, you have to ensure that these other fundamentals are in place. So, I mean, from a parent's perspective, watching their child and they come to you, and again, you say you hear this all the time, and I can tell you, if I had known you when my kid was playing juniors, I probably would have called you with this same thing. My kid looks great in practice, hits the ball solid, moves well, can hit targets, but gets into a match and the point construction just isn't there. He doesn't have the tools or the knowledge to string points together to win games, to win sets, to win matches. And there is a disconnect there, right? I mean, it's really bizarre to me that kids that develop this amazing technique, amazing footwork, are strong mentally, don't have that other piece of it. And some kids have it intuitively. They're born with it somehow. They understand the geometry of a tennis court and how to move and where to hit the ball and all of that. But that's a rare breed that comes to it naturally. Most of the kids have to be taught. And what is happening out there that the kids aren't learning this facet that really makes the difference between winning and losing?
I agree with everything that you just said. Almost every single player that has come through my door, and I've trained some amazing amateurs. I've sent them to great colleges. It's been very exciting. They don't really know what they're doing. They compete well. They fight hard. They may have a decent foundation of technique. They may be great athletes, but they really don't understand where they should be serving, how they should be creating a point, how to plan a point. They get up to the line, they serve, they run, they hit the ball, they win, they lose, and they do it over and over and over again for a couple hours, and hopefully they win. Right. And they're not really assessing what's going on. And these things, they are taught. They're taught. Okay. I mean, it's not go take your lessons in groups and go to a court and go play a match and you'll just learn on your own. I mean, I don't, because quite honestly, I mean, I don't see kids improving in that aspect. And so if you're not improving in how to compete and how to construct points for your game, you're not going to get better. You're not going to get the results. And so that's a tough part of development, I think, for systems, for academies, and for a lot of kids, because a lot of kids want to go and take a lesson and work on maybe some technique, or coaches want to do that, and then groups, and there's a bunch of kids on the court. So I don't know how you accomplish really learning how to construct a point unless it's in a very controlled private arena for that individual or for those two individuals on the court competing against each other with a coach that knows how to coach it.
Well, and that was going to be my next question for you, Todd, is the issue that so many of the coaches out there don't understand how to teach point construction, or is it just a matter of they've got so many kids on the court and this is not something that you can do in a large group environment, or is it a combination of factors?
Well, I think it could be a combination. I mean, and I can tell you, I mean, I'm on social media all the time. I'm trying to put stuff out there and put good content and everything. And so if you look at a lot of videos, how many videos do you see where kids are actually learning how to play? Right? They're drop fed, they're hand fed, they're fed out of a bucket, all these things. They're hitting balls all over the place. So when people that are listening to this podcast, when you go and watch these videos on social media and the coaches that, are coaching and doing these things, you're seeing kids hitting the ball all over the place. And I can tell you from what I think of when I see a lot of these videos is I can't really figure out why they're doing these drills and what the productivity is. And so if I don't understand it, do the kids understand it? Are they learning? Are they getting better? Or is it a show for social media? Is it a marketing thing, or what is it? Right. And so the kids are hitting the ball all over the place. And so the marks that they're hitting, those are not marks on a tennis court that you're going to become a really high level tennis player and win more matches. It's a nice show, right? I mean, it may look good, but what is the purpose? I don't see right. the purpose. What are the children learning? So I think it's a big combination of things. I think that, I think in America, I can't speak for the world, but in America, a lot of things are lessons in groups in this country. And so it's not a surprise that America is struggling with, and I'm not even talking about the pro tennis arena, it's struggling at the amateur arena to have kids go to elite colleges and play high in the lineups. All you have to do is just look at the rosters. So these are the concerns from the college coaches, and I mean I see it coming through my door all the time, is that from the foundation of what we spoke about to the concentration to being able to concentrate and duplicate and have and have enough repetitions and stroke production over and over and over again, we're not seeing that. So then that's what we're teaching. And then when that is solid, then we can get into how to construct a proper point so the kids can have great results and be on their way to achieving what they would love to achieve in their tennis.
So, I mean, okay, so we get the strokes down, we get the footwork down, we drill targets, and help our kids learn how to be consistent at hitting a target over and over and over again. And then the next step after that is the point construction. How is that taught? What do you do as a coach to help a kid learn how to construct a point in various situations?
Sure. So we put the targets. We put 4 targets in the service boxes. So we have a wide on the deuce. We have a tee on the deuce. We have a tee on the ad. We have a wide on the ad. Then we have targets in the forehand corner. If this was obviously a right-handed player, on the deuce side, about 3 feet by 3 feet from the baseline and the sideline, and the same on the ad side. Okay. So we lay out these targets just like what you saw on Facebook. Yeah. Right. And Instagram, what I put. Okay. Then they start obviously with their serve, right? Or if they're returning, and if they don't hit that target, the point stops. Okay. And we do it over and over and over again until they can hit a proper serve on the mark. And they've trained it with serving buckets and hitting targets and those types of things. But so they start with that. Then they start with a proper first ball. And also each individual, each child is developing their own game, so that, like I said, from 16, 18 years old, they're playing amazing, great tennis, and they're peaking and playing great tennis. So, okay, so let me interrupt you 1 second. So sure. Frank Giampaolo talks a lot about an A game, a B game, a C game, like that, and recognizing what kind of player you are and developing, strategies around your game style, whether you're an aggressive baseliner, whether you like to serve and volley, a chip and charge, whatever it is, that's your style. And so you're taking that into more detail, or we're taking that into more detail with this conversation today, saying, okay, you have a style that you like to play, and you as the coach aren't trying to necessarily tell a serve and volleyer, no, don't play that style. We're going to change it to this style. You're helping them learn how to construct a point around the style that they're comfortable with. Am I saying that properly? I would say yes and no. Okay. So there are many times where the style of play that a junior is playing is not going to work when they're 16, 18 years old. And I can tell you, for the most part, what I'm talking about is they're too defensive. They're scared to miss. They're playing too passive.
Is this true for boys and for girls?
Yes.
Okay.
I've had some cases where kids maybe play too big and they get wild, so we have to tone it down and teach them how to be more solid, but they're still really hitting the ball and accelerating and doing those things. But for the most part, most of the kids, their foundation, many of them, is that they're playing too passive and too short. And so by the time they get to 16, 18 years old, at those crucial years, a lot of them get a little beaten up with that game style. Okay, you can win with that game style many times in the younger divisions, but then as you start going into the 16 and the 18 and under divisions, you got to have some pop, and you got to be physical, and you got to be strong, and you got to be able to, have some weapons and construct the points and those types of things. Mm-hmm. So first of all, we have to develop the confidence of the player, right? If they're scared to miss, we got to teach them and really change the foundation of, they believe that they can load up with their lower body and they can rip a heavy ball and be able to do it over and over and over again, because in their mind, they're thinking that if I accelerate the ball, I'm going to miss and I'm going to lose, and that's not good. So many times we have to emotionally kind of fix some things as well before we go into, developing their game style.
Okay. And so once you do develop their game style, that's the next step after that is the point construction phase, right? Once you identify, and help them kind of hone in on those skills of you've got to play more aggressively, you've got to, be on or inside the baseline, you've got to keep the ball deep, yada, yada. Now it's time for point construction. Okay. So talk me through a lesson beyond, we talked about first you set up the targets and the first thing that has to happen is they have to serve to the target. Then you work on the first ball after the serve. Then what happens?
Then it really depends on how good their first ball is. So what you'll see with a lot of juniors is that they serve and then they hit the ball right back to the kid. They don't open the court. So their serve gets canceled out. Right. So that's not good. Right. So,
right.
So they have to, first of all, they open the court and hopefully they're playing aggressive because they're the server. Right. And they're hitting the targets and they're using their weapons to break down the opponent's weakness. Right. And I can tell you, for example, that in America, if you can hit specific targets 3 times, 4 times a point, you can become an unbelievable player in the country. But you have to train it and you have to be disciplined every single day about it. You can't just hit the ball all over the place and run and hope you win. Okay. So, like I said, they're constructing and there's patterns of play that each individual player should be working on every single day so that they don't have to really think about it when they're in a tournament. It's trained. It's in their brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's many times what we're doing.
Can you give us an example of a pattern of play?
Sure. On a deuce side, you serve a heavy ball down the tee. If your opponent who is returning, usually they're going to return the ball down the middle or they'll return it down the line. You then open the court, cross court to their backhand. And in high level tennis is played out of the backhand corner, usually with a backhand cross court or an inside out forehand. If you watch great players, that's where the point really begins. Okay. And so whoever really dominates that rally can then open the court to exploit a running forehand with either a backhand down the line or an inside in forehand. So it depends on how well you're hitting those targets, how well you're opening the court to start the point. And so these are the most crucial shots in tennis, and they're the least worked on is the serve, the first ball after the serve, and the return of serve. The kids that I train, they're training full time. They're training 4.5, 5 hours a day. They probably work on these things at least an hour a day. The serve, the first ball after the serve, and the return of serve. You can hit balls all day long. You can take lessons in groups all day long. If those things are not solid and they can put them on specific targets, the child is going to struggle. The foundation is not there.
Well, with point construction, though, Todd, how much of it is dependent on what your opponent gives you back? Because that's where, for me, as a player, and my point construction skills are almost non-existent. I'm one of those players that hopes the other guy misses. So that's how I play.
Oh my gosh, we got to fix your brain.
I know. I am old dog, new trick, that whole thing. I don't know. But it's so let's say the kid serves an excellent serve out wide to the backhand and the opponent hits, he's ready for the serve, hits an insane return. And now your plan of what to do with that next ball is kind of gone out the window because your opponent threw something at you that you weren't expecting. Right? What do you do in that situation? That's where I always was so confused. Well, it happens. Sure.
Yeah, no. Well, it could happen. Then all of a sudden, like for example, today at practice, I have a girl who's a very high level player. If people are on the social media, they can see her. She's a very good player, and so she was serving the same spots against one of my hitting partners, who's a great player. right? And he started getting on her serves, no problem. And she kept serving there, and she kept serving to the same spots. And you have to, it's experience, but it's also taught, is that you have to understand what is working and what is not working. And a lot of kids, a lot of times they can't differentiate. Many times they're just in the moment and they're playing and they're not understanding what the opponent is doing. Mm-hmm. You have to understand what you're doing, and you have to understand what they're trying to do to you. And then how do you break that down? Okay. So you may have to make subtle adjustments, but many times in junior tennis, I can tell you that kids, they may play one game plan and you'll see it for a point, and then it's gone for a couple points. Then they go back to it, and then they mix it up again. And all they're doing is complicating their life. They have trouble playing the same point with the same discipline over and over and over again to make their life easy. The same patterns over and over and over again. And so they lack that foundation of understanding what works and how they're going to get on the court and win that match handily and get off the court. And it comes down to discipline of training and understanding the game. And these things are taught. And so that's why we're talking about this on this show.
Right.
Right.
Well, but
and
so,
okay. I mean, if you go to a tennis tournament and you watch a player play a really good point, he or she may have a great serve, put it on a great mark, then they open the court and they play a really good point, solid and everything. But can they do it over and over and over again? And usually the answer is no, it's gone. Right. And then all of a sudden they get, as we call it, they get their satellite back, which is their brain, right? They get their focus back.
Yeah.
That's what we call it. Pierre calls it satellite. Oh, we lost satellite for a little bit. Well, let me know when you get the Wi-Fi back, right? And right, it's funny, that. But these are some of our things that we talk about, right? Oh, we lost the satellite, and then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 points go by, and it's sloppy and it's ugly, and then they're hitting the ball over the place, and then we get the satellite back again, and the point construction looks good, and it's this roller coaster, rocky, ride that juniors go through. And quite honestly, it's training, it's discipline, and it's day in and day out of doing these things, the foundation of all the techniques, the movement, all these things, and then into constructing points that's going to set players apart. That's what happens, and that's really what goes on.
Right. Well, so they're playing this pattern, it works, and then they've been well trained, so they play it again, it works again. They play it a third time, it works a third time. They play it one more time, and it breaks down because the opponent is now onto them, understands what they're feeding them, and the opponent is ready and takes control of the point. So I guess one of my questions has always been in regards to point construction, how do you know when it's time to move on to the next pattern of play?
Well, let's talk about the percentages. If you play a certain pattern over and over and over again, say you do it 5 times in a row and the opponent beats you at it once, should you change?
I mean, if you're winning 4 out of 5 points, probably not.
Correct.
Right.
Normal junior, the second the opponent or beats them or whatever, they change. Mm-hmm. And that's not correct. And I've seen this from day one, and I just don't understand it. I wasn't trained that way, is that if something is working, you don't change it.
Well, because I think in a kid's mind, if they lost the point, that means it's not working. Even if it's 1 out of 5 points that they lost. In their mind, right. It's not working, right? Because they lost.
Proper thinking in tennis.
Well, I get that, but I mean, I think, a kid has to hear that from somebody. Look, hey, you played this pattern 5 times, you won 4 of the 5 points. Yeah, you think that doesn't work? Yeah. That's the definition of working. So it's okay. You're not going to win every single point in a match. And one of the things that I find so fascinating about watching professional tennis, especially the top players on both tours, is watching and really paying attention to the patterns and what percentage of the points they're winning and what percentage they're losing, but continuing to play the same pattern. I mean, Roger Federer has his pattern, his go-to. Rafa Nadal has his go-to pattern. He plays over and over and over again.
Every great player does.
Right. Yep. And they lose points playing that pattern because either, they just missed the ball, they weren't able to execute, or the opponent hit a fabulous shot that they didn't have an answer for on that particular point, but they go right back to that pattern. And like you're saying, our kids don't do that and aren't being told, at least in my experience, that losing 1 point out of 5 is a winning proposition. Losing 1 point out of 3 is a winning proposition.
Correct. Yes.
It
math. It comes down to discipline. That's what this whole tennis thing comes down to.
And lack of fear. I mean, I think, they lose the point and they think, oh God, this isn't working. I got to go to something else. Instead of thinking, all right, I've won, X number of the last points. I didn't win this one, but that's okay. Let's try again. Let's see if we can do it again.
But correct. I also believe, and I'm just going back from my thoughts of, developing player, just like many kids are developing junior players and everything, is that the training that I went through made me believe that the things that I was doing were correct. And so I didn't stray away from them. I didn't lose the trust or the faith, and I believed that they worked, and they did. So that made me believe in myself. If you abandon a game plan, then what are you doing? What are you believing in? How are you playing? How do you define the type of player that you are? And if you went to many players, many kids, and went to them and said, what are your strengths and weaknesses and what defines you as a player, they'd have, many times they'd probably have a lot of problems answering that question. Mm-hmm. What kind of player are you? How are you going to become the most successful player? How do you construct points? How do you use your weapons? How do you break down the other player? And they would probably have a lot of trouble answering those questions.
Sure. So again, going back to teaching point construction and doing it in the confines of a tennis court and a lesson, you're working on first the serve, making sure the targets are hit. Then and I know I keep saying this, but I think it's important to understand how these lessons progress. And, as parents, we want to know what our kids should be out there doing every day that we're paying hundreds of dollars for. So we get the serve target, then we get the first ball target. Then what happens?
Then here's what I can tell you is that there are two main game plans. If you watch great players, they either have a 2-in-1 pattern, which is 2 to the backhand and then open the court, or a 1-in-1 pattern. If you really study tennis, right? They have the player running side to side, and there's specific reasons why they have these patterns. A 2-in-1 pattern, maybe they're trying to break down the forehands and then break down the backhands and then break down a running forehand. A 1-in-1 pattern could be that your opponent has poor mobility. So you're opening the court and going 1-in-1 to making it a running match so that they're on the move the whole time. Okay. Those are two very main patterns of play. Very standard, the most standard of patterns. Very simple. Okay?
And why 2-in-1? Why not 3-in-1 or 4-in-1?
It could be if say that backhand side is really weak, but usually if you go 2 balls to one side and you keep going there a third, fourth, fifth time, that opponent parks there and they'll start to hit the ball a little bit better. Mm. Just as a generalization.
They're not recovering to the center of the court between. They realize you're going to the same spot over and over again. So why should they recover?
Right. We call it parking.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, here and I call it parking it there. So once they park it there, they know you're going there. Right. And so then, then they may start to hit the ball a little bit better, and whatever the case shall be.
Right.
But many times you don't want that. But if a side is so bad, and I can tell you, I was on the ATP tour. If I see a side that's so bad, like really bad, really shaky, I'm going to go there all day long, and they're going to have to prove to me that they can hurt me with their worst shot. And so if you watch great tennis players on the most important moments of sets and games and those types of things, really smart players, they know exactly the weakness of their opponent, and they hammer it because they know that during crunch time and the most stressful situations, the most important points, their weaknesses break down.
Yeah.
And that's understanding tennis.
Well, and that's also scouting your opponent, right?
100%. It's being organized. Yeah, and understanding the game.
Right. But even if you understand the game and you understand point construction, in junior tennis, oftentimes it's very difficult to scout an opponent. You're playing multiple matches in a day in a typical junior tournament, not at the ITF level, but USTA tournaments, you're playing multiple matches a day. So you don't really have time to scout out your opponent unless you're just playing locally and you see the same kids over and over again. Then, of course, word gets out, play this kid's backhand, drop shot this kid, can't move forward, hit lobs, the overhead's terrible, that kind of thing. And the word gets out on the street about that. But at the professional level, the coaches are out there scouting the next opponent, pulling video. I mean, they're doing so much work. And I once had a coach say to me, who was coaching a professional player, that if a player goes out on court and loses a match at the pro level, it means one of two things. Either the coach didn't do his or her job scouting the player and developing a game plan, or B, or two, I forgot if I said A or one. Secondly, that the player either ignored the coach or just didn't execute the game plan. Just wasn't able to make balls that day because everybody has a bad day. So to me, that was so interesting to think about the fact that, if a player goes out and loses a match and a coach has given them a game plan, it's either because the game plan was wrong and the coach messed up, or the player just didn't have it that day and, just couldn't make the balls in the court. And I was trying. Go ahead.
Say yes and no to that.
Okay.
Yes and no. In a really high level, in a professional match, really high level, you have to understand that sets are probably determined by about 1 or 2 points.
Right.
Whether they're played well or they're not played well. That's a really high level of tennis. And you may play the point really well and go for the right shot, and you may miss it by inches.
Right.
And that's that's sports. I mean, it's a game of inches at that level, and the margins are so small.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Okay. So if a player loses like that, it's just, the player just didn't hit the marks that day, just wasn't able to execute enough times to win the match.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to at any level. Yeah. Is execution. Whether it's junior, or college, or professional level, is executing and being disciplined and being smart. That's what it comes down to.
Well, but sometimes if the game plan is wrong, and even if the player is doing a game plan, if the opponent has it figured out or it's the wrong game plan for that opponent, you're still not going to win. So that's why the whole
you want me to tell you what I'm thinking?
Yeah.
Fire the coach.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
That's your livelihood. I mean, if we're talking about pro tennis, if I hired a coach and the game plan was wrong and the tendencies of my opponent, is to normally serve to certain spots and they were and it wasn't right and all those things, then there's something majorly wrong.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So,
Yeah.
but at the junior level, we don't get the luxury of scouting opponents and having time to develop a game plan for a specific opponent. Sometimes we do, but the majority of the time we don't. And so that's where having drilled these patterns of play and having had conversations, like talking to each other between the coach and the player, and making sure that there is a clear understanding on the player's part about why you're hitting this ball to this spot at this point in the point or in the game is so crucial. And those conversations don't tend to happen enough, in my opinion.
It's imperative that kids understand this if they want to be good. Imperative.
Right. And but they're not going to understand it unless it's in the moment. Okay, you played this point. All right, you won that point. What did you do that caused you to win that point? Tell me.
Right.
I served here, then I hit here, and my opponent hit there, and I saw an opening and I went there. That to me says that the player understands what's happening out there.
And as well as what is making your opponent uncomfortable.
Right.
Right. What don't they like?
Right.
Right. And then you hammer it.
But the coach has to ask those questions in the moment, because to do it after a match is already over, there's too much emotion at that point. And so to do it in the moment during practice, having a kid play a practice set with a coach standing there and asking the questions every single point. What did you do there?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And right. Yeah. And if they lost the point, what did your opponent do that put you in a position that you were unable to execute your pattern? What happened? Talk about it. Tell me in words what happened so I know that you understand what's going on out here.
Yeah, this is, you hit the nail on the head. That's what great coaches do.
Right. But not every coach does that. And I get that that's really time consuming, and it requires the coach to be 100% dialed in every single minute of that lesson, which, that can be a big ask too, for the coach to stay dialed in the whole lesson. But to me, that's what sets great coaches apart from the rest. Just my opinion.
I agree. You couldn't have said it any better. I have nothing to say about that. I mean, it's great job.
Widom,
I mean, that's basically it. Right?
So as parents, what should we be asking for if we are the kind of parent that's calling you and saying, my kid does great in practice, but gets on the match court and just falls apart? What should we be asking of our child's coach to help them get to this place where they understand point construction?
What did you learn today? Did you learn how to play today, or did you just hit balls and go home?
And then what do you say to the coach if the kid says, oh, we hit, 5 buckets of cross court forehands today? Then what? What do you do about that as a parent?
Well, I mean, is that what the child needs? Is that productive? I mean, do they need that?
Okay.
Right? Or time could be spent more wisely.
Right. Assuming they don't need that. Assuming the answer is, this is a 15-year-old who has very nice strokes and knows how to move and can hit the targets. I mean, does the kid approach the coach? Does the parent approach the coach and say something about the lack of instruction around point construction? As a coach,
Well,
what would you want to hear?
as I say, results don't lie. So if you're a serious, parent and a junior player, and you're not having the results, then there could be a red flag. No doubt about it. Right? And if your child is struggling in tournaments and they don't really know what they're doing and they're flustered and they don't know how to handle the moments and the stresses.
But give us some tactics to use as parents approaching this with a coach. As a coach, what would you want a parent to come to you and say?
Good question, Lisa. Very good.
Well, we need strategies. I mean, that's the issue. Like, it's all well and good to point out the issues that are happening out there, but if we don't have tactics to fix things, then it's just going to continue, and we're going to be frustrated, and our kids are going to be frustrated. So,
what are the results of the coaches? Right? What are they good at? What type of universities have they sent kids to? Where have those kids played in the lineups? What were the level of those kids? That says it all of what's being developed.
But let's say you're in a part of the country where there aren't a lot of options in terms of coaches, and you can't afford to move down to Florida to have your kid train with Todd Widom. So you're stuck with the coach you've got. The coach is an excellent player. They may have a great resume of their own tennis abilities, but for whatever reason, the coach isn't teaching point construction. How do I, as a parent, talk to the coach and say, hey, my kid's strokes look great. He's moving great. She's happy. She's having a great time out there. But I watch her in tournaments and I don't see any kind of organization or thought process going on. Is this something you can work on with her? Or is it something I can help her with? I mean, is that something that a parent can say to a coach?
I mean, I think it's tough. What I do think is that they should request that coach to go watch the child compete.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and hopefully the coach has a background in the knowledge in teaching kids how to play, not just strokes or movements. Right.
And I will say that if you request a coach to go watch your child play in a tournament, offer to pay for that time. I mean, if the coach doesn't say to you, I'm charging you for the time, as the parent, you need to offer to pay for the coach's time, because if they're watching your kid, that's time they're not getting paid to teach somebody else. So just throwing that out there. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So you have to watch them compete, and you have to really pay attention to what's happening. Is your students, are the techniques breaking down? Are they mentally breaking down, or physically? And how smart are they playing, and how they're handling the pressure situations and the atmosphere? And there's so many things that you cannot duplicate in practice, and that happens in a tournament. So those are tough things. A child resorts back to their comfort zone in a tournament, right? What their habits come out in tournaments, in the most pressure situation, which for junior players is a tournament situation. So that's what you assess as a coach. How well they understand their opponent's strengths and weaknesses, and how they're going to break them down. Right. And that comes down to the tennis IQ of your student and how well they've been trained.
And so if you are a parent with a child who is, as Todd described at the very beginning of this podcast, plays great in practice, but for whatever reason, the results aren't happening on the tournament court, then it's time to really insist that the coach come watch not just 5 minutes of a match, but an entire match, maybe 2 matches, maybe 3 matches, and really see what your child is doing and going through on the match court so that the coach can then address those issues the next time in practice. Is that what you're saying?
That would be ideal. That would be really good. Now, hopefully the coach understands how to teach junior players how to properly play.
Right.
That's another discussion. And quite honestly, I've had coaches send me players and some of them I don't even know, and they would tell me, like, listen, I'm good with kind of the technical side, but I don't really understand like how to teach them how to do the things that we're speaking about. Mm-hmm. I've had multiple coaches, send me messages or send me players over the years, right? And so they understand their limitations, and maybe they're very good in teaching certain aspects of the game, but maybe not this particular, these particular things. So you have to understand. I mean, you have to, I think great coaches can adapt to many different students, male or female, different, game styles, body types, all different types of stuff. And they can adapt, and they can structure a game so that they can play their best tennis when it matters most, right? When they're in their latter stages of junior tennis and then on to college tennis. That's what great coaches can do, I believe.
Well, I agree with you. And with that, we are coming to the end of our hour, Coach Todd. So any last words of wisdom you want to leave our audience with?
Well, I mean, I think we covered most of it. I mean, I believe that, I see a lot of kids and they're drilling and they're in groups and they're taking a lot of lessons and everything, but the results many times, are not there. So that's concerning. And I've been to plenty of tournaments and you see a lot of kids lacking in these areas. And it has nothing to do with talent, but to me, it has a lot to do with training and who's guiding the kids. And so if you can find the right people to be teaching these crucial things, I think the children can do great things. But if not, I believe that, unfortunately they're going to plateau in their development, and they're going to wonder why. And so a lot of times the tennis IQ of the junior players is lacking. And it's not only the junior level, the college coaches are saying the same thing. So, yeah. But, these things are taught at in the junior stages of development. And if they're not taught, then it's going to be a rocky road.
Agreed. Well, Coach Todd, thank you as always for sharing your wisdom. I think we should start calling it Widom's wisdom. What do you think?
Whatever you like to call it, Lisa.
I will have your contact info, including your social media, in the show notes. So for those of you listening, if you have questions for Todd or would like to reach out to him, check out the show notes on ParentingAces.com, and all his info will be there. Todd, thanks. It's been fun chatting with you. It's now that we're on different coasts and different time zones, it's been a little wonky, but I'm glad we finally made this happen again.
Yeah, no, it's fun as always. I enjoy every minute of it.
Well, thank you. And to my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We will catch you next time on Parenting Aces. I'm Lisa Stone, and you've been listening to the Parenting Aces podcast. For tennis parents, by a tennis parent. If you like what you've heard, I hope you'll share the podcast with your tennis community. For all the information you need to navigate the junior and college tennis journey, be sure to check out ParentingAces.com.